It's just you have to understand that there's always immigration risk.
My job as a litigator is to tear apart records and find mistakes.
Yeah, but like, just for me to understand, so, and you have to explain it to me.
In Trump, they were fighting. They're going to fight. They're going to hire a lot of litigators when President DeSantis comes in here and starts rolling back all of these great reforms that Joe did. It's just going to be the same thing. There hasn't been a change. Here's the thing. You may disagree. Biden really missed an opportunity when he had Congress to make a mark in immigration. He could have done a number of ways, a skinny reform. He did nothing. He focused at what he saw was a crisis at the border. There's been a crisis, quote unquote, crisis at the border since President Reagan was in power. Honestly, are we have like the Contras come back up to, this is ridiculous. There is always going to be people crossing the border. You know why? Because there's been a civil war going on in Central America since the 1980s, since actually we started creating MS-13 and MS-17 through jails in Los Angeles. And we shipped them back, and then they kind of grew into the disastrous weed that they are. And then we have a lot of part of it too is the economies in South America in those countries have not treated the young people kindly because of the farming that went away and everything else. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing wherever you go in the country. You have a lot of young people out of work who aren't happy. And then they start fighting, and then they start killing people, and then they show up to our shores. And we need to not blame them and kind of look inward and outward at the countries and our national policies, because it really reflects on our national security and everything else. I love when the Department of State.
But you're talking about sort of long-term policy issues. There still needs to be short-term solutions to address that. But let me go back to something else, which I think is an interesting point, or a tangent that I'll bring up to a point that you made about the Trump administration and the Biden administration, and how in some ways they're a lot different, but in some ways, at least in terms of the processes that they take on, the Biden administration has actually taken advantage of some of the precedent that the Trump administration has set. So like prior to the Trump administration, this idea of using travel bans, like blanket presidential proclamation travel bans, was pretty novel. It wasn't really done that much, if at all, as I recall, in the Obama administration or the Bush administration, or really prior to that. And then, starting with the Muslim ban, and then it in the intervening years, there was the immigrant visa ban. They were banning H-1B visas for a while. I think it was very surprising, and I know that COVID-19, it's been a big issue, but obviously over the last 3 years and dominating the Biden administration, but the use of the same exact mechanism really is this blanket travel ban, with the same sort of national interest exceptions to skirt through judicial review to make it palatable, is still being used by this administration. They haven't really fully stepped away from what the Trump administration was doing. They still have sort of built on and taken the precedent that the Trump administration set in order to implement their own priorities. And a lot of people would say, even maybe the vaccine travel ban made sense at the very beginning, when the vaccines came out, but why do we even still have it, like over the last 4 or 5 months, for example? These are things that, to me at least, are they're solutions that aren't really solving problems. And
it's a executive power grab. You know, I mean, once you give the executive power, you know, away, like the Supreme Court did in Hawaii v. Trump, you know, it would take a really act of humility for a president to say, you know, that's a little bit too much for my office. I don't want that power. Like, it's like you have a blank check. I mean, you know, I mean, not that it has no limits, but it's a pretty big ringing endorsement. I do agree with you wholeheartedly, though, that the expansion of that ban under INA 212F is gone from something that has been used, but it has been used very narrowly for particular groups, like, you know, people who trading in diamonds from a horrific regime, or people associated with a terrorist group,
anti-corruption things.
Yeah,
like
you know, or you know, the closest analogy was, you know, for Haitians back in the day, like 1980s, who are coming, or who are, you know, kind of caught offshore, and it culminated in a Supreme Court case called Sale, where they initially kind of endorsed this use of presidential authority, but it was always supposed to be temporary as well. You know, it's supposed to be for a limited duration.
I think, though, because the Biden administration has basically taken the taken over the torch on these travel bans, it really just ensures that this is going to be a permanent fixture going forward. Like, travel bans are going to be something that I think immigration attorneys and applicants, for that matter, are going to be dealing with in one form or another, probably for the next 50 years. I would even go as far as to say that that's actually, you know, whether Trump becomes president again or not, or just has the 4 years that he had before, that more than, you know, on immigration policy, way more than the wall or the southern border or whatever. I think that is going to be, frankly, his immigration legacy is he basically made the use of travel bans essentially like permanent in our politics.
Well, the thing about it too is you have to look at, you know, we talked about, so Hawaii v. Trump kind of endorsed that executive authority, but it was Congress that wrote the law, and, you know, they could take it back because they delegated that. I mean, I think they actually delegated more than they could, you know, because Congress can't just give away what they own, which is immigration, is something that it's a shared authority with the president, but it's not something like they just give away, because when you have those bans that come up, it basically, for lack of a pun, trumps all the other immigration laws. You know, like, what's the use of an immigrant visa if you can't enter? Right.
I think though, those travel bans, that they're problematic because they're just inherently political, in the sense that the crux of the authority is the president just thinks it's in the best interest of the country. You know,
I honestly think if Trump were in power right now, you would have bans against nationals from Russia, Iran, and China.
Could be.
Not could be. I think most definitely he would have done that already, and then he would have probably extended it to, you know, it could be anyone who's on his you know, his not happy list. You know,